Welcome to CBC in Antarctica. This continent is icy and unforgiving, but it's changing.
Antarctica has always been a land of extremes, a frozen desert at the edge of the world, where daylight and darkness wage months-long battles, and the cold can claim life in an instant.
Richard E. Byrd, first to blaze an air route to the North Pole, prepares for a similar flight over the bottom of the Earth.
Into this forbidding wilderness stepped Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a man whose name became synonymous with daring, innovation, and endurance. His expeditions, spanning the 1920s through the post-World War II era, pushed the boundaries of human exploration, charting unclaimed ice, flying over the poles, and establishing the first permanent American bases on the continent. Yet alongside the awe-inspiring achievements, Byrd's ventures have spawned some of the most enduring myths in modern exploration. Today, we'll revisit the tales of daring as the last survivor breaks his silence about the Admiral Byrd expedition. This is one story you can't miss. Stick with us till the end. It'll be worth it. Richard E. Byrd, an extraordinary man. Richard Evelyn Byrd was born on October the 25th, 1888, in Winchester, Virginia, into a family of the Virginia gentry. He entered the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis in 1908, graduating in 1912, and embarked on a naval career that would increasingly focus on aviation and exploration. His early service included assignments aboard battleships such as the USS South Carolina and USS Wyoming. But his real turning point came during and after the First World War, when he qualified as a naval aviator, leveraging his interest in flight into the emerging realm of airborne navigational technology. Byrd's aviation credentials grew quickly. By 1919, he was involved in the Navy's first transatlantic flying boat efforts, and during the 1920s, he was developing new tools for aerial navigation, such as the aerial sextant and wind drift instruments. His combination of naval discipline, aviation innovation, and leadership skills set the stage for his next chapter, polar exploration. The spring of 1926 marked a milestone in Byrd's career when, on May the 9th of that year, he and pilot Floyd Bennett claimed to have flown over the North Pole in the Fokker trimotor Josephine Ford, departing from Spitsbergen, Norway, and returning after about 15 hours and 30 minutes. At the time, this feat received widespread acclaim, and Byrd was awarded the Medal of Honor for risk of his life in that flight. Byrd next turned his ambitions toward Antarctica. In October 1928, he launched what would become his first Antarctic expedition. Byrd's motivation in pursuing polar aviation and exploration stemmed from a mix of scientific, nationalistic, and strategic impulses. He sought to apply the cutting-edge technologies of flight, radio, and aerial photography to the remote polar regions, thereby expanding human knowledge of geography, meteorology, and geology. Byrd's efforts occurred during an era when national prestige was tied to firsts in exploration, conquering the poles, opening new frontiers, and demonstrating technological leadership. The US Navy and private philanthropists supported Byrd, not only out of scientific interest, but also because the polar regions were seen as strategically significant, especially for future naval operations, communications, and global presence. Let's dive into his heroic exploits. Byrd's first Antarctic expedition. The first Antarctic expedition, led by Richard E. Byrd, spanning 1928 to 1930, marked one of the most ambitious polar undertakings of its era. Departing in August 1928, the expedition comprised 4 ships, 3 airplanes, and a crew of roughly 83 men, baronically equipped. They carried some 650 tons of supplies, 95 sled dogs, and aircraft adapted for the harsh polar climate. Their destination was the Ross Ice Shelf, a vast floating mass of ice at the edge of the Ross Sea, where they planned to establish a base and launch aerial, geological, and meteorological explorations into the Antarctic interior. Upon reaching the Ross Ice Shelf, via the Bay of Whales ice harbour, they selected a site just a few miles inland and erected their base camp, Christened Little America, construction commenced soon after arrival in late 1928, the camp serving as the expedition's hub through the austral summer of 1928 to 1929 and the ensuing winter. Given the perpetual darkness of the Antarctic winter and punishing weather conditions, the establishment of Little America was a feat of logistics. Personnel worked in extreme cold, brought heavy equipment ashore, built shelters on ice that slowly shifted and carved, and prepared aircraft with skis for polar flights. Their choice of the Bay of Whales site placed them near the route taken by earlier explorers such as Roald Amundsen, but Byrd aimed to go higher, farther, and by air. Scientific investigation formed a central pillar of the expedition's mission. As soon as Little America was operational, teams ventured out on dog sled and snowshoe journeys, while aircraft performed photographic aerial surveys of vast stretches of previously unpatrolled Antarctic terrain. For instance, a geological party under Dr. Lawrence M. Gould travelled into the Queen Maud Mountains, mapping approximately 175 miles of mountainous front and identifying new terrain, which would later be named Marie Byrd Land, in honour of Byrd's wife. Meteorological observations, ice thickness and snowdrift measurements, and studies of wildlife and glacial geology supplemented the aerial work, making the expedition's scientific output substantial for its time. The pinnacle of the venture arrived on November the 28th to 29th, 1929, when Byrd, with pilot Bernd Balchen, co-pilot and radio man Harold June, and aerial photographer and cartographer Ashley McKinley, took off from Little America in the Ford tri-motor aircraft named Floyd Bennett. They set out at 3:29 p.m. on November the 28th and reached the geographic South Pole by approximately 1 a.m. on November the 29th, after an out-and-back flight of 18 hours 41 minutes. The journey required them to ditch empty fuel tanks and emergency equipment to gain sufficient altitude for crossing the polar plateau and clear a pass above 11,000 feet between Mount Fridtjof Nansen and Mount Fisher. On its completion, Byrd dropped an American flag over the pole, circled a few miles beyond to offset navigation error, and returned safely to Little America around 10:11 a.m. local time. Operating in the Antarctic was a severe test of human endurance and technology. Over the course of the 16-month stay, the crew contended with shifting ice, bitter winds, and the constant threat of equipment failure. Their base perched on a section of the Ross Ice Shelf, a floating expanse of thousands of square miles of ice, meant that the terrain underfoot was dynamic, slowly moving seaward and carving into icebergs. The expedition managed to map new mountain ranges such as the Rockefeller Mountains and extend air survey lines across remote sectors, achieving coverage of the Antarctic interior that was unprecedented at the time. Upon its hiatus in early June 1930, the team returned to the United States, where the expedition was widely celebrated. Byrd received promotion to Rear Admiral via Special Act of Congress on December the 21st, 1929, and the mission was awarded the Gold Medal of the American Geographical Society in recognition of its achievements. But this was not the end. In fact, this was just the beginning. Second Antarctic Expedition. The Second Antarctic Expedition, led by Richard E. Byrd, spanning from 1933 to 1935, represented a bold escalation in ambition beyond his first mission. In October 1933, the expedition departed from Boston aboard the vessel Jacob Ruppert, loaded with supplies, aircraft, and personnel for a return to the Ross Ice Shelf region. The team established their main base at a new camp often referred to as Little America 2, and simultaneously set in motion plans for a remote interior outpost known as the Bolling Advance Base, situated approximately 123 miles or 196 kilometers south of the coast-based camp. The expedition's scientific goals were sweeping. The effort aimed to conduct extended stays through the austral winter, execute aerial surveys covering hundreds of thousands of square miles, and gather meteorological, geological, and biological data. According to expedition records, aircraft and dog sled teams mapped more than 450,000 square miles of previously uncharted Antarctic interior terrain. Geological parties uncovered tree fossil fragments only 210 miles from the South Pole, demonstrating that the continent had once been significantly warmer. The base at Bolling Advance also served as a vital meteorological station during the austere winter months, collecting temperature, wind, barometric pressure, and auroral activity data under extreme conditions of darkness and cold. Byrd himself endured one of the most harrowing episodes of his life while manning Bolling Advance Base alone. During the winter of 1934, he remained at the station for approximately 5 months, enduring temperatures between -58 degrees Fahrenheit and -76 degrees Fahrenheit, which is between -50 degrees Celsius and -60 degrees Celsius, in conditions of near constant darkness. Ventilation failure in his hut led to carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty stove and generator, leaving him with shooting pains in his head, nausea, and a near collapse of physical condition. His Morse code transmissions to Little America became erratic, prompting a rescue mission by his team. On 10th August 1934, a tractor-borne rescue party comprising Thomas Poulter, E.J. Damas, and Amory Waite reached him at the base. They found Byrd extremely weak. He had lost approximately 60 pounds, or 27 kilograms, in the ordeal, and remained with him until October 12th, when he and Poulter were evacuated by airplane, the remainder returning via tractor train. Though he survived, Byrd's health was never quite the same. The experience remains one of the most dramatic near-deaths in exploration history. The expedition also witnessed a number of tragedies and hardships among its broader crew. The use of tractors hauling sledges across crevassed ice fields, extended dog sled journeys, and constant exposure to bitter cold led to multiple cases of frostbite, snow blindness, and injuries from falls into unseen crevasses. A newspaper claim from 30 October 1934 documented a team member, Byrd, who reportedly suffered snow blindness and later a fall into a crevasse and was evacuated for treatment in Dunedin, New Zealand. Despite the adversity, the scientific output of the expedition was noteworthy. Aerial photographic surveys extended the known Antarctic coastline by more than 1,000 miles, and explorers catalogued previously unknown mountain ranges and ice flow features. Teams studying marine and terrestrial biology documented lichens, mosses, seals and bird populations in the harsh Antarctic environment, contributing to baseline data for polar ecology. The expedition's mapping and geologic work laid the foundations for later missions, including the US government's larger-scale campaigns after the Second World War. The team established a shortwave radio station aboard the expedition ship Bear of Oakland, broadcasting updates and adventure reports directed at audiences in Buenos Aires and relayed to New York, reaching an estimated 19.1 million listeners during the 1933 to 1934 season. But wait, the episode does not end here. Operation High Jump. In the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, the United States Navy initiated what remains one of the largest Antarctica-bound expeditions in history, Operation High Jump. Officially designated the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program, 1946 to 1947. It was commissioned on 26 August 1946 under the command structure of Richard E. Byrd as officer in charge.
Operation High Jump commenced in August 1946. It was the largest, most heavily armed naval task force ever sent to Antarctica. Leading the mission was Admiral Richard E. Byrd, one of the most famous naval officers in history.
And Richard H. Cruzen as the commanding officer of Task Force 68. A force of approximately 4,700 men, sailing on 13 ships and supported by 33 aircraft, with some sources listing 70 ships, set off to Antarctica in the Austral's summer of 1946. The fleet's multi-part objective was to test and prove the United States' capabilities in polar environments, conduct extensive aerial and ground reconnaissance, map hitherto unexplored sections of the Antarctic continent, and establish a robust forward base, ultimately named Little America 4, on the Ross Ice Shelf near the Bay of Whales. The official mission goals published by the US Navy included training personnel and evaluating ships, aircraft, vehicles, clothing, fuels, and maintenance procedures in extreme cold, determining the feasibility of establishing, supplying, and operating permanent or seasonal bases in Antarctica, developing techniques for construction and operation of air bases on snow and ice, particularly for ski-equipped aircraft, and conducting wide-area photographic reconnaissance and mapping of coast and inland ice. Moreover, while publicly denied, a strategic aim included consolidating US presence or sovereignty over as much of Antarctica as feasible. The expedition's timeline commenced with departures from Norfolk and other US ports in December 1946. By December 12, 1946, the western group of ships had reached the Marquesas Islands en route to Antarctica. The central group of the fleet arrived at the Ross Ice Shelf around the 16th of January 1947, establishing their base and unloading tractors, jeeps, bulldozers, and other heavy equipment to erect Little America 4. At the ice shelf, they built 3 packed snow runways and 1 short steel mat runway, assembled Quonset huts, tents, and support modules, and commenced detailed aerial survey operations. In the course of the expedition, the task force captured an estimated 70,000 aerial photographs of the Antarctic coast and interior, covering vast swathes of the continent's edge. The aerial component of the mission featured ski-equipped R-4D transport aircraft flown from the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, flying boats such as the Martin P. BM-5 Mariner from seaplane tenders, helicopters, and sled tractor traverses across the ice. One notable incident occurred on the 30th of December 1946, when a Martin PBM-5 George I crashed near Thurston Island during a reconnaissance flight, killing 3 airmen: Maxwell A. Lopez, Wendell K. Henderson, and Frederick W. Williams. The remaining 6 crew were rescued after 13 days. Scientific and logistical tasks ranged from meteorological stations, ice thickness and glaciological investigations, geological sampling, mapping of mountain ranges and ice flows, to testing of cold weather equipment and field techniques. For example, the central group made tracked vehicle journeys toward the Rockefeller Mountains and provided an interior tractor assault into previously unmapped regions. Data collected from these efforts improved the Navy's understanding of operations in polar zones and set the foundations for later scientific research programs. Despite its scale and ambition, the operation faced considerable environmental and logistical challenges. Sea ice and pack ice delayed landings and restricted some flights. Helicopter operations required extended preparation, such as fuel and oil warming, because of the dense cold air. One helicopter crashed on 22 January 1947 near the carrier Philippine Sea, due to rotor icing and wind. The base was evacuated in late February 1947 ahead of the Austral winter, with operations officially declared complete. Naturally, these expeditions gained legendary status. The extremes of the poles presented an unprecedented challenge. Byrd faced them head-on, risking even his own life in the process. But the picture is still incomplete. Later revelations and mysteries. The unfolding of later revelations surrounding Richard E. Byrd's polar explorations and the vast archive of related documentation offers a layered picture marked by genuine scientific endeavor, enduring mysteries, and frequent myth-making. His Antarctic missions yielded declassified military documents that confirm extensive training, reconnaissance, and logistics operations, while simultaneously yielding no verified evidence of underground cities or advanced civilizations. A telling example is the archive at the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center at The Ohio State University, which indexes Byrd's papers and shows that while his polar flights generated a mountain of data, the content sticks to meteorological logs, flight diaries, mapping records, and correspondence. Byrd's own health revelations form a particularly vivid element of his personal record. During his second Antarctic expedition in 1934, he operated a solitary weather station known as the Advance Base, also Bolling Advance Base, some 123 miles inland from the main Little America camp, enduring temperatures dropping to -76 degrees Fahrenheit or -60 degrees Celsius, and complete polar night conditions. Within this isolation, a faulty stove and poor ventilation led to carbon monoxide poisoning. Byrd later described headaches, nausea, and diminished physical condition. His radio transmissions became incoherent, prompting a rescue by Thomas Poulter, E.J. Demas, and Amory Waite, and Byrd lost about 60 pounds, around 27 kilograms, before being evacuated by air on 12th of October 1934. These documented medical episodes speak to both his physical near-death experiences and the psychological strain induced by months of darkness, cold, and isolation. Alongside the factual records lies a contrasting domain of fringe claims and speculative narratives. A subject repeatedly invoked is that Byrd claimed he had flown over the land beyond the pole, discovered hidden subterranean cities, or made contact with alien intelligences. Works such as The Secret Lost Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd and The Phantom of the Poles claim to show a so-called secret diary in which Byrd writes of green valleys and civilizations beyond the South Pole.
And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole. I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored. So there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Yet investigators and historians note that there is no verified first-hand account of Byrd himself referencing such discoveries, and no credible archival evidence for the authenticity of such a secret diary. The declassified documents of Operation High Jump and subsequent Antarctic programs show no legitimate record of underground megastructures or extraterrestrial contact. These were only standard military scientific undertakings. The role of the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 also factors into the web of speculation. Signed by 12 nations, the treaty prohibits new claims of sovereignty and restricts military operations south of 60 degrees south, a move frequently seized upon by conspiracy theorists as evidence of concealment of secret Antarctic discoveries. Yet, archival research reveals that the treaty's major intent was scientific cooperation and demilitarization of the continent during the Cold War era, not suppression of alien cities. These elements reflect a sharp contrast between the documented expedition records and the sensationalist narratives. On one hand, Byrd's archives include detailed flight logs, meteorological observations, geologic surveys, and mapping of thousands of miles of Antarctic coastline and interior. On the other hand, the sensational claims often draw on partial diary extracts, second-hand testimonies, and misinterpretations of military secrecy. For instance, Byrd's own book alone describes his near-fatal stay at the Advance Base, a candid account of carbon monoxide poisoning, isolation, and hallucinations. Yet the text is grounded in accepted documentary evidence, not hidden secret civilizations. Within the scientific community, the consensus is clear. Byrd's achievements in polar aviation, logistics, and exploration are well documented and celebrated, but there is no credible evidence supporting underground civilizations or suppressed discoveries in Antarctica. Researchers at OSU's Byrd Center emphasize that his papers contribute more to geographic discovery of the continent than any other individual, yet make no claim of finding non-terrestrial civilizations. Myths often emerge when media coverage, limited public record access, partial or damaged diary pages, and the mystique of polar isolation combine Byrd's high-profile excursions, his status as a national hero, and the fact that military documents were once classified all provided fertile ground for speculation. The declassified military records validate the logistics, training, and mapping work that went on. Byrd's own acknowledged health crisis affirms the human cost of exploration, and the unverified claims of hidden civilizations remain in the realm of mythology, not historical fact. The unfolding archive, therefore, invites both admiration for the real accomplishments and careful discernment of where evidence ends and myth begins. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.